So I'm with Michael Chen. I'm Kwasi. We're going to have a quick debate relevant to capitalism, but I feel like the topic is different. So pretty much we're having a debate on resolved. If you are successful, one of your main purposes in life should be to help others. Michael will be taking the affirmative, and I will be taking the negative. So I guess Michael can start with his speech. I'll give my speech, and then we'll have time for rebuttals, and then we'll have questions from the audience.
All right. Thanks everyone for being here today and for taking the time and joining us for this debate and for being here to support us on this journey. All right. So before we begin, just a quick introduction on the purpose of the debate is we are it's just a low stakes casual debate, and we hope to keep an open mind throughout. All right. So. Firstly, I would like to begin with defining the operative words in our motion. The first word of which is help. So I would like to define this as we know, it can mean two different things. It can, in its most fundamental sense, the word help can mean to either fulfill any want of a person, irrespective of whether that person is wanting or suffering, or it can be restricted to be directed at suffering. And that is the definition that I will choose to use. The second operative word I'd like to define is what it means to be successful. And after a lot of thinking, I have decided that to, rather than give any fixed threshold of success, such as a billionaire or someone like that, I will instead simply choose to prove that any incremental effort that is taken towards my stance should be supported, as opposed to your stance, which, if I understand correctly, is suggesting that no effort at all needs to be taken actively towards encouraging people to help others. And lastly, there's also the term self-sacrificing, which might come up during this, and I would say that to sacrifice means commonly a giving up or a doing without something, and that something could be a material possession, or it could be one's time, energy, or utility. And therefore I would, in a sense, agree with you that you do not need to self-sacrifice to help others, because when one has the right motivations, helping others is not really sacrifice at all. So instead, I'm taking opposition with the second part of your argument, which I know you haven't said yet, but which is that one should simply do whatever he or she wants. And I will give three main supporting arguments for why I don't believe this. The first of which is that helping others, if you're successful, must be done in order to obey Singer's first logical premise of morality. In other words, if a successful person does not make helping others one of their main purposes in life, then they're violating Singer's first logical premise, which I'll explain. And the second reason being that not every career path intrinsically helps others in suffering, and in fact, many do the opposite. They exploit others and produce harm both morally and economically. And so, to some, I'm taking the proposition side in this debate that yes, if you are successful, one of your main purposes in life should be to help others, and for the following three reasons. One, people, especially successful people, have a logical moral duty to help. Two, a successful person should make one of their main purposes in life to help others, specifically by choosing one of four paths, as doing so would be both morally and economically advantageous. And three, it is economically advantageous for people to be encouraged to help, specifically through three ways: embracing their biases, checking their power, or regulating with a light touch.
Is that your
Thank you.
argument?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll give my intro speech. So, the argument, the thesis is that if you are successful, one of your main purposes in life should be to help others. What does that mean? It means it should be your main priority, one of your main priorities. So, I give an argument simply of the number of priorities. I think the top priorities you should have is a priority towards health, a priority towards self-preservation, and a priority towards safety. If it's not your top three priorities, then it's definitely not your main priority. And I think the priorities of health, self-preservation, and safety come through my arguments, and I'll explain why my arguments makes much more sense than the idea of making your main priority to help others. So my argument comes into three prongs: the forced labor argument, the rational self-interest argument, and the so-called help argument. I'll explain the third one in detail. So the first long prong is the forced labor argument. If you are compelled to help others, let's say you're a doctor and you've done a certain amount of surgeries that you've been paid for by either the government or a certain your employer, or by private practice. And let's say you want to assist another person, whether they're suffering from mental images of not feeling comfortable in their own bodies, or they suffer a health issue. But the cure requires something where a risky surgery, or something where you're doing something to cause an impact that may be even worse than the cure, in your opinion. Well, the person who wants help demands that help to cure their primary issue. And as a doctor, you should have the discretion to choose whether you want to help a person. The same thing applies to other scenarios, like, for example, donating to charity. If you want to donate to a charity, are you required to help unlimitedly? Like, should your main priority to be to help others in all ways? Because if you give money to a charity, you're definitely helping someone. You might not be helping the people you think you're helping, but you're definitely helping someone by donating your labor, time, or resources to others. And why I say you shouldn't compel someone to provide free labor, free time, or free resources not out of their own will is because it implies this forced labor argument. So my argument, so pretty much with all arguments for compelling someone to help others are the same arguments for compelling things like slavery, or things like stealing resources from other people. It's the same arguments that encourage theft or forced labor. All right, so my second prong is this rational self-interest argument. So this argument is kind of complicated, but I'll explain it in simple terms. Pretty much, I believe that part of self-actualization may come from helping others, but that doesn't make helping others your main purpose. As I said before, your main priority should be health, self-preservation, and safety. All of those can somehow be related to helping others, but helping others isn't the main operative word of this purpose. The way that rational self-interest causes better outcomes than perhaps I would say the ideas of self-sacrifice, as you mentioned before, or the idea of helping others, is that the best way to incentivize people to helping others isn't this compelling others to do things for you, but to encourage people to expand credit systems and expand systems in which people can engage for improvement of their own lives through trade or through incentivizing charity. So, for example, I would say this: the richest people aren't rich because they hoard resources. They are rich because they have credit. They have the ability to convert resources or their own skill, their own labor, into something else through the process of trade. And if no one is able to buy, or if no one wants to buy or sell from you, if no one wishes to extend you credit, you can have all of the resources in the world, but you'll starve to death. The same is true when it comes from people with as much resources in the world to people with as little resources in the world. If you expand credit to people and encourage people to trade with each other, you have the ability to create wealth for the majority of society. So, how do you help out people? You incentivize people to take care of their own problems. And the way you can incentivize people to take care of other people's problems is through the price signal. Things are expensive because there aren't enough resources directed at the problem, or there's inefficiencies in the system. You figure out ways to incentivize people to reduce these inefficiencies or provide more resources, then these people become wealthy and the problem is solved. You see these things with TV prices going down over a course of time while retaining higher quality. And you see things where politicized goods that are demanded as rights, like healthcare and housing, being more expensive because you have the market mismatch to providing healthcare versus providing healthcare efficiently versus enabling people to build upon systems to make things cheaper. You obscure the price signal, so you cause problems. The same logic applies to forcing people to do things without positive incentives. So, for example, rent control. You may think that rent control is good, and for people who have rent-controlled apartments, that might be a very beneficial thing for them. But you end up with this corrosive effect where you have a system where people are paying landlords below market pricing, and landlords are unable to improve the quality of their housing stock or build new housing because they can't rent for any higher than this set amount based on the government. This is worse for cities than bombing cities, in fact, because when you bomb cities, at least you can rebuild using the price signal rather than being forced by government fiat to lower prices. Self-sacrifice doesn't do anything but make people think of you fondly, which is useful if you want influences. For example, Uber creating goodwill and subsidizing cheap or near free rides only to up prices when competition reduces. Our society is only rich because of positive sum trade and a culture that supports great people, invention, and success, not because of sacrifice. If we have all the sacrifices but outlawed merchants and profiteering, then we would be living a pre-modern lifestyle. All right, my third prompt is this. Help is subjective, and requiring self-sacrifice for the sake of the good of others provides negative outcomes. For example, donating to... I mentioned this before, but if you donate to charity and the charity does fraud, like for example the Save the Kids coin, I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but it's an interesting topic where it was a pump and dump scheme that was said to benefit charity, but it was only pocketed by these scammers. So, but the people felt good buying this cryptocurrency because they thought they were helping others. They were motivated both through self-sacrifice and the desire to do some good things. But they ended up profiting some guy who wanted to scam people. So, another example is this. Some of the worst tragedies in the world happened when people were forced through forced labor or forced activity to encourage a benefit from others. I gave the example of a doctor, and there's another you may have heard of Frank Tufano, right? He got this surgery because one of his a doctor decided to help him do a risky surgery that he probably shouldn't have been doing, but he was incentivized because he wanted to help this person. In addition to that, many tragedies were caused by the idea of helping others over rational self-interest. Like, for example, people thought that people gave an argument of economic necessity for things like slavery, and they thought that slavery helped. They thought that slavery helped not only the system, but the people involved in it. But it was an exploitative system because they weren't given a wage for their labor. They weren't given freedom to leave their contracts. They didn't have the choice. And because of this, there were many abuses that came from that. Also, you have systems like, for example, the Soviet Union, where you've had the idea of from each to their own ability, to each their need. But you had situations where the worst people got into power and not only starved millions through like crises like Holodomor, but you've had rapists get into power like Laventry Beria, and you've had people who've done terrible things get into power because all through the idea of a focus on helping others rather than rational self-interest. My opponent gives an argument based in opposition rather than an affirmative. So he believes that there's a logical moral duty to help. But I feel that the ideas of self-preservation, health, and safety are much more powerful motivators to create a better society than a focus on helping others. With that, I would like to close my argument. Cross-examination time, right? So are we going to flip a coin to see who goes first?
Usually he goes first.
Okay, you go
It
first.
just goes.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, do I have to start with your first point, or
You can start with the main arguments, my first point, whatever points I make, and then you can go into details.
Okay.
Can I have the pen?
See, so I guess I'll start with your point that I find most that I take most issue with, which was your third point, where was the so-called help argument, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I find two problems with this argument. The first is, in my opening, I already specified the type of help that I meant in my stance, which restricts it to only help that is directed towards suffering. I can come back to that, but more importantly, I do not think that it is meaningful to raise the what if that donating to charity could produce negative outcomes, because the same exact what if could be applied to your stance of refraining from encouraging people to help others. So it could be said that there could be harms, and in both cases, just as there are harms to anything. But not only that, but there are so many extremely feasible, morally good, and economically advantageous actions that can be taken to minimize the risk of harm arising from charities. With your Save the Kids token example that you brought up, I think that the people who were gullible enough to fall for that crypto scheme is not representative of the norm of normal charitable people, and instead what people should turn to is leading organizations such as GiveWell, which is a nonprofit that spends tens of thousands of hours each year on researching the causes that are the most important and that can do the most good in the world. And out of hundreds that they have screened, they currently only recommend 4 charities. And so that is where that is a very feasible way to solve that concern you had of what if charities are harmful. There are other organizations of similar quality, giving what we can, life you can save, and so that is what I would say in response to your third prong, that helping others may provide negative outcomes.
Is that it?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll give. So pretty much, Michael argues that we should give to the charity he prefers, and that will solve the issue, I assume. The issue with that is that if we let's grant that Michael is all-knowing, and the charities he chooses are the best charities to give to, and the poor gullible people who have Save the Kids token, who took Save the Kids token, were uniquely gullible. Would you think charities like the Red Cross are considered bad charities or unethical charities that they shouldn't be given? Because there's many charities in the world, and perhaps maybe the Red Cross might not be one of the most worthy of your charities. But even in cases like the Red Cross, there was so much bloat, for example, in the Haiti earthquake, that when there were millions of dollars of donations, they were only able to build like 3 houses. And that's because of the administrative burden of running a charity. So do you think it's giving to the charities you want that causes the best outcomes? Also, he didn't address my other arguments. He didn't address that the top priority should be health, self-preservation, and safety, which means that if it's not your top 3 priorities, it's definitely not your main priority. Remember, the thesis is if you are successful, one of your main purposes of life should be to help others. So he doesn't address my points regarding my main arguments.
Well,
and even if he, let me finish. even if he gives the argument that even if my third prong is that it gives a what if argument, which it's not. It's giving a numerous examples of charities that or intentions that were good but resulted in bad outcomes. For example, the people in the Russian in the people during the times of the Russian Revolution were destitute. They were poor by any standards of the world. Most of the pre-modern world was poor. Was it because of charity? Was it because of good intentions that reduced it, or was it because of the advantages that came out of capitalism, which is what we live in a relatively post-food insecurity world in the West. And part of that reason is because we built systems through incentivizing the most basest desires of humans to have status, to collect resources, to trade with others. We incentivize that to make a good society. Do you think that that the successful people focusing on my 3 priorities or your priorities help in creating the best society? That's my main argument. And your arguments haven't addressed that. Secondly, he doesn't address my point on the idea that self-sacrifice or helping others, which is the idea of alleviating suffering, has alleviating suffering as your primary goal. He doesn't address that those issues aren't addressed by this self-sacrifice, that you have to focus on helping others. But my argument was that it doesn't address my forced labor argument. It doesn't address my so-called help argument, because I give these fundamental examples. It doesn't even address my rational self-interest argument. That rational self-interest was what caused society to advance. So he addresses none of my points, but he gives a few non sequiturs, and that is why I believe that he hasn't addressed the argument in a way that would be satisfactory. Thank you.
Okay, well, first off, I would say that I was choosing to, I thought that I could only respond to one of your
You can
3.
respond to all.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll talk longer this time.
Okay.
We'll see if these you consider non sequiturs. Firstly, with regard to your claim that my stance on saying that one of your main priorities in life should be to help others is at odds with the three priorities that you gave, which are health, safety, and self-preservation. I would say they are not in conflict with each other necessarily. Part of the reason for that is I allowed for the one of the clause, but in addition to that, in my second prong, in which I talk about how there are many ways to help people, and that doesn't restrict you from pursuing your other goals of self-preservation or health or safety at all, and to get more into that. In my second argument, I state that to help others, you should take one of four possible paths in life, which are being a direct benefactor, an activist, a researcher, or a high earner, which includes professional services jobs like banking, consulting, and trading, which, based on my framework, can actually be considered among the most, or among the least, the least harmful careers out there, based on my rationale, which I'll get into. So I don't think those priorities are at ends with one another. Also, you assert that you claim there's this forced labor argument, that attempting to achieve this end and encouraging people to help would only breed resentment, leading to hatred. I find that to be the opposite of what I am pronouncing, which is that this is about compassion, the opposite of hatred. And going back to your third argument, I will give another counterpoint. So I already talked about the Save the Kids coin you brought up. You also brought up that cosmetic surgery case, and my response to that would be that would not be the most relevant example to bring up, as it was a cosmetic procedure, not a life-saving procedure, and the analogy could be made of training a seeing eye dog to help a blind person, which it costs around $40,000 to train a seeing eye dog, versus donating a few $100s to help trachoma, to help fund trachoma treatments, which can help with the same amount of money hundreds of people be cured of blindness. So I don't think those two are morally equivalent there, and so yeah, that's all for now.
I guess we can get to questions.
Well,
Alright, yeah, we want to say something?
I mean, I had more about my three prongs, but
You didn't give that was for your speech. You could have gave a longer speech.
I mean, you can circle back. I don't know if you guys want to stay on form, but
Yeah, I mean, you can go. Yeah, give.
okay. I guess going back to my moral rationale, the specific framework in which I set it up is based on Peter Singer's philosophy, which is three simple logical steps. The first of which is that suffering and death resulting from lack of food, shelter, and medical care is bad, which we all agree on, hopefully. The second, which is if without sacrificing, where is it? Oh yeah. If it is in your power to prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing something nearly as important, it is wrong not to do so. And number 3, by donating to aid agencies, you can prevent premise 1, which is the death and suffering from lack of food, shelter, and medical care, without sacrificing anything nearly as important, which is also pretty incontrovertible. And therefore, if you do not donate to aid agencies, you're doing something wrong. Now, the occasional objection to this is only to do with the second premise. And to that I have a rebuttal as well. But yeah, that's the basic moral framework that I use to set up my moral justification. And it also goes back to the drowning child thought experiment that Singer proposes.
I guess I have a question, because I'm a little familiar with Singer and like his argumentation. And so I guess for Michael, I have a question. Like I thought maybe you mentioned some response to this in your introduction, but like for Singer, I'm curious about like the extent at which you're compelled to help people, because that's a little gray, and it becomes gray. Like I think in his argumentation, he doesn't really make a specific guardrail on the point at which you're not compelled to help, like the point at which you're not, like, to be very overt, like financial, to give financially to people that are suffering, right? And like, I think he doesn't provide that point at which, like, you're off the hook, or you shouldn't ever do more. And so I'm wondering, like, following that logical conclusion of that, like, you can yourself become very, or like, you know, not unsuccessful, or not have, you know, live very minimally. And I'm wondering, like is there some sort of like piece of that argument of like where it becomes okay to like look after yourself and like be more self-centered in terms of your finances and things like that?
Yeah, no, that's
I could answer it for him.
well,
I have an interesting
maybe
answer.
after I go.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, that's a very important question. And there's another philosopher called Travis Tillerman who actually Singer himself acknowledged that question, but he poses, so Tillerman poses a counter thought experiment called the drowning children scenario, in which instead of just one drowning child, you know, so basically, like, to put it briefly, there's hackers that have gotten a hold of your bank account, and every minute they're withdrawing $500 from your bank account, and you know, it's only a 5-minute walk from your house to the bank to freeze your account, but along the way you pass by a vast plot of land where there are hundreds of shallow ponds, and in each pond there is a child who's drowning. So it's like it would only take you a few minutes to save each child, but if you were to do that for the rest of your life, then there would come a point where the common sense consequentialism would come into play and say that you should be allowed at least one break from that to go watch a show or something with your money, which is how a lot of rational people would think. And so, where am I going with this? I think it's. I think what I concluded was that in this debate, all I have to prove is that currently people are not doing enough, so while it's hard to come up with any single it's more so that any effort should be taken at all, which he's arguing the opposite of, rather than not.
I think in your introduction you said something about like, as long as it comes without self-sacrifice or something.
If you are successful. That's
yeah,
pretty
that's
much my
yes, I remember now. That's what helps lower the burden of proof for me. I think is directing it towards people who are already successful, who have more to give. I think that helps relieve some of the concerns there about what about whether I should use the funds to send my kids to a good school instead of helping someone else. If you're already successful, I think you would have more financial freedom to accommodate both goals.
I mean,
I think there's also an interesting, I summed it up to money, but I think it can also be like, you can think of this argument in terms of time too, like you can donate your time to help people, you can do like charity work that way too, and then when is the limit where it's too much onus on you to sacrifice all of your time versus none of your time. And yeah, I think I like your answer, like nothing is being done, so at least you should start, right? Do something to help.
Yeah, and to elaborate, there are like many billionaires out there who are not doing anything at all. With Bill Gates and Warren Buffett being the exceptions to the norm. You have people like what's his name? Like that one guy who made money from the penny stocks.
he's not a billionaire though. Jordan Belfort?
No. I think it does like an eye or something. Like from shorting, like.
Brian Johnson.
Are you talking about the corporate raider at Carl Icahn?
No. Yeah,
The Big Short guy?
Huh?
The Big Short guy?
No, not him. A different guy.
Hey, he's not a billionaire either.
Wait, how do you know?
Well, you don't know that, but the money he made wasn't $1 billion.
Who?
What is his name? I forgot his name, but the Big Short guy.
Oh no, yeah, no, I'm not talking about him. Yeah. So, and another statistic actually is the people with households with over earning more than $200,000 or more actually tend to give a smaller percentage of their income to charity than households earning less than $50,000 a year, with it being 1 to 2% versus 3%. So that's also an interesting thing to think about.
But they pay more in taxes, though.
Well, that's actually something I'm supporting, which I can get into as well.
And I guess Kwasi,
Yeah.
you said something along the lines of like it. Well, I gathered that like for you, it's better to just support the system, and then the system will pick up the people and improve their lives at a baseline level on the whole. And I guess like my question is like, does like charity and helping others and things like that have to be almost mutually inexclusive with like invention and like innovation and things like that? Because I know like
That's a good question.
Think of like examples where like that sort of support would spur on invention and innovation in the system itself.
That's a good question, and why I would argue that in some cases charity may actually do more harm than good is because, like, for example, there's this one common charity thing is where if you buy a shirt from me, I'll donate a shirt to someone in the third world or something. Often these are companies that have already low cost of living. They're competing with local companies that are have textile mills, or in the case of if you buy this burger, we'll donate some food to charity. It's there's these issues where you distort the local markets and you cause you cause them to be unable to provide for themselves, creating this dependency issue, because essentially you have a Western company that's providing something for free when they can build the industry to build it themselves. This is another argument why tariff, like probably the best argument. It's the best argument for import duties for these lower income nations, so they can build an industry for themselves, so they can have the same benefits that we have from having a powerful economic base. So my issue isn't charity in and of itself. My issue is that the charity has to go. It's that common phrase: give a man a fish and he'll feed himself for a day. Teach him how to fish and he'll feed himself for a life.
Yeah.
I feel like charities that focus on that second aspect rather than that first aspect are probably more beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily eliminating suffering in the short term, but eliminating suffering in the long term. That's more preferable. And that comes through building economic systems.
Well, I think that in order to build those systems of trade, you need humans who are healthy and alive in the first place, which is what these causes that GiveWell supports is directed towards.
I guess I have one other question for Kwasi. Like, when you say, like, okay, you have your baseline argumentation, but at a certain point, do you like look at the world and see that like we're doing a bad job at mitigating suffering, based on like leaning on like big powers like America and systems to help people, and you see like I don't know
I think
you know like is there a point where that starts to crumble, where it's like the system isn't really picking up the people that it's supposed to be picking up and helping as it's based
I
on?
think the problem is that the modern charity system or the modern system is creating a dependency trap. That's my biggest issue. So we have a certain system that we're focused on, like things like USAID supporting institutions that focus that provide local charities and services for people that create a benefit, but also reduce the ability for them to rely on themselves. And it's similar. It's an argument. Like, I feel like charity, for example, ineffective charity. The main feature of ineffective charities, which apply to a lot of the charities, isn't that they're focused on building these systems, allowing them to create capital formation for themselves. It's solving a deep wound with a Band-Aid, I would say. So I feel like it's part of the reason why I argue that Africa hasn't advanced while Asia has advanced very rapidly in the past 50 years, is because I feel like the African countries have been focused on this dependency trap. They're relying on their former colonial masters, and they're also relying on the government to solve their problems, the government or someone else to solve their problems, rather than focusing on what they all can do to build an industry. So the problems are multifaceted, but I would say that it's not necessarily you can treat the things you see, but that doesn't fix the fundamental issues that are deep within. And those issues are the fundamental issues that need to be get at to solve. And that isn't a problem of charity, it's a problem of institutions.
Yeah, and I guess my question was like are the institutions fulfilling on that promise to help those things? I can point to a number of examples in our world, like U.S. backing out of the Russia situation and stepping away from food stamp coverage and you like there's a lot of like things, especially in the now in the world where sort of the system is almost not coming up behind the people that need it, right? And so like systemic failures, I that's what my question was sort of pointing to that, but yeah.
I get what you're saying. Yes, I think that comes through the primary cause versus like the deep cause that I'm talking about, but that's a whole other debate in and of itself, I think.
I don't know if I could be an impartial observant of this. Like, I have very strong opinions about
Let's
this.
hear.
You want me to say what I think?
Go
I
for
mean,
it.
well, I can like read you. Like, I have something that I think it'll be quick. Do you want to hear this?
I do.
Okay, I'll read it. Well, right. Capitalism, we can all agree, I think, it depends on the context, right? Capitalism of the 1980s is different than capitalism today.
And capitalism of the 1890s was
Exactly,
different.
yeah. It's all different. But I think to just contextualize what I'm saying is talking about like capitalism today and what I think about it. It's for me, there's a problem, definitely a problem with how it's operating, functioning today. I'm talking about the United States, not talking about anywhere else. I think one of the strengths of capitalism is that it motivates people to maximize their self-interest. Right, it accepts that people will naturally want their own self-interest, and it guides them with an invisible hand almost. And it's healthy and good when it can push them towards their self-interests by getting them to have productive labor that produces value for society or for others, right? But the problem arises is that, right, whenever people maximize their self-interest, they think it will automatically be useful. But the problem is, right, if you financialize and you deregulate, then there's going to be a lot of issues. And that's the problem today for me, is the deregulation, the financialization of like the banking industry, tech, all those things. That's where the problem arises. It's incentivizing these industries to extract value rather than to, say, for example, the Goldman Sachs of the world to actually invest in businesses that will produce value either through leveraging new technologies, right, supporting young businesses, growing businesses that will actually help people in the world with various problems, right? You don't see that these days. You see them investing very few. I actually read this stat the other day that like Goldman Sachs only spends 2% of its revenue, whatever its spending power, on actually investing in businesses, like new businesses. And most of the revenue it's spending, right, most of the money it has, it's spending on like collecting fees and things like that, and just like these financial games that have gone out of hand. So I think that's my problem. You need to regulate the way that we used to a little bit more, and yeah, I could go on and on, but that's my claim. So
Is
I
that
think,
a question for me or him?
yeah, no, I guess off of that, my question would be, trying to think of something succinct for you guys.
Well, I have thoughts off of that.
Yeah,
So do I.
If you wanna, just like stream consciousness. What do you think about what I just said?
Do you want to go first, or do you want?
Yeah, I can go first.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think the solution could be in regulating with a light touch, meaning, I guess, simply put, it could be thought of as taxation, but the rationale behind it is is based off of Professor Bob Frank's theory, Professor at Cornell, who says with the reason why taxation works is it actually shifts people's frame of mind. Like, for example, with property taxes, people with a lot of money, and I'm not sure if this is directly responding to your point, but people with a lot of money buy mansions simply because they can afford to. But what that does is it makes the middle class feel like it's normal for them to want larger houses as well. And this can have issues with diverting these resources away from more meaningful causes. And so by increasing property taxes on the affluent, it actually shifted everyone else's frame of mind in a positive direction. And there's actually living proof of this with the smoking tax. They actually found that smokers were happier in higher tobacco tax states because there were fewer people around them to tempt them from smoking, because we follow the actions of our peers. So I think light touch regulation, it works because it doesn't force you to do anything, so it's not breeding resentment, but it works through shifting your sort of mind.
All right. Well, I feel like Michael's answer probably would give you a society a lot like the UK, where you have financialization of capital, but you don't really solve the root problems with it. So the issue with financialization of capital can be solved with multiple issues, with multiple things. And the first prong of it is, unfortunately, the main issues of it is we have a strong currency right now, which means, well, we used to have a strong currency, but it might change with the policies of this current administration, which might cause a huge pain. But there's no way to solve the financialization of capital without causing huge pain, either in the long run or the short run.
What do you mean by that? Pain to who? What kind of pain?
Pain, because, for example, we run large trade deficits, and pretty much our economy is essentially ran through huge consumer spending, and then we have the government issued treasuries, and then we have, finance capital pretty much push paper around the world using investments that they have from foreign capital. And the thing is that it creates something that's beneficial to asset holders, but not to the working class. And the main issues with that is that you have people can spend things because spend on things because it's cheap and because the government buys, the people buy treasuries from the government, they can support a welfare state that can support some of the people spending money as well. So, and also, you create another problem, which is because the currency is strong, wages are more expensive compared to other places. So, like for example, if you're to get a job in Wall Street or whatever, you're going to be paid, you know, 150,000, 200,000 as a analyst or associate. If you're paid as a day laborer, you might be paid like $50,000, which in places like Europe or, well, in places like Africa or Japan or other places, that's a very high salary compared to, like, on an objective level, that's a very high salary. So
For your spending power.
yeah, for your spending power. And although it doesn't feel like it, although it doesn't feel like it to that person, because things are so expensive. So the way you solve that issue is you pretty much have to reorient your economy to an industrial economy again.
Yeah.
Which, that is a very painful process, like
Yeah.
extremely painful. So painful, in fact, that it would cause a massive recession. Like, people would be, like, you would have, like, people jumping out of buildings because, you know, they lost, like, their house lost, like 50, 70% of their value. All their stocks caused 90% drops. Also, the government treasury market, like, treasuries are, like, messed up as well. So the transition from a financialized economy to an industrial economy is a very painful transition that no one is willing to make.
Well, do you think that, I mean, I haven't even thought about this. This is fascinating new territory for me, the way I think about this. But, you know, that the next evolution of capitalism will be something entirely different, not an industrial economy or a financialized economy, but something new
Yeah.
that we just...
And we may potentially see that with AI, which might result in maybe this unfortunate situation where we have like a situation like techno-feudalism or something like that, where you have certain people who are stuck in wherever they are at. They have UBI, but UBI only goes so far, and
Yeah.
it's like this perpetual malaise that is happening while like the government is getting more powerful and the rich get richer, or the rich are the people in government or whatever.
So you don't like that outcome?
I don't like that outcome, but the how you fix that is that you have to make sure that the winners are diffuse, and how you do that is it's almost a problem with the attitude towards wage labor. I think you have to make people comfortable with being independent workers. Like, you have to, like, for example, how society was, like, for the longest time in society until, like, the 1940s, I would say, the world was composed of, like, yeoman farmers and, like, free labor and, like, people controlling their own property, selling their own crops and living on their own. It was less stable because if there was a famine or something, you would lose your income and you would lose everything. But you had that sense of agency, and I feel like people have lost that sense of agency.
So where's sense of agency in terms of
being more independent in your disposition, not focusing on a job to depend on yourself, but focusing on developing your own skill set through your own through a focus on your own skill set. Like, for example, the people like that are like independent lawyers or independent or like farmers who own like less than an acre of land or something like that.
I'll just give an example
Yeah.
that you just gave, like a famine. There's no agency, you can't control.
You can't control that, obviously.
Yeah.
But the agency in and of itself is the fact that you control your own destiny within the limits of the laws of nature, I guess.
Okay.
So to go back to like financialization and my problem with where we are today, if you guys don't mind, just like to scope out my problem is more than just thinking about it as a passive negative on society. I think it's doing like contributing active harm on most people. Like it's driving inequality and it's driving a lot of bad outcomes. And I think that energy could be redirected because at the end of the day, I think there is a form of capitalism that works where you can be self-interested, but if it's regulated, the system is regulated, your self-interest will align neatly and nicely with providing positive value for society and others as a whole. So I think, right, the problem for me with financialization is you're creating,
But
you're
I feel like
deregulating, right?
I feel like financialization is through the process of this regulatory framework, because the only people who can do the regulations are the financial companies. The only people who can follow the regulations that the financial industry have are companies big enough to absorb the legal costs. Like, my job personally is making sure the bank doesn't like go to jail because they're violating stress tests or like not enabling capital. Like, my job is pretty much to be interfaced with that regulation. And I'm saying that if you had, so I feel like,
Look,
the way it was like in the 1890s was probably the Wild West of capitalism. Like,
Sure.
you had no regulation on banking. Banks couldn't issue their own currency. Like, pretty much the barriers of entry,
objection.
the barriers to entry are so low that anyone can form a business and anyone could, there were no moats. That's what I'm saying. And pretty much if you create a huge regulatory industry, of course you're going to reduce the business cycle which goes up and down.
I see what you're saying.
But you're going to make the winners, it be a winner take all system.
Let me just say, like, I'm not saying that we have to jump in and just like create all these new regulations. I think there should be some of that, but I'm saying that there needs to be a way to stop this malignant, I think the financial system has this malignant profit motive right now where financial systems are an end unto themselves, where, right, I can give you concrete examples where a private equity firm will go in and buy out like a nursing home company, and then their
and then cut
analysts
services.
will squeeze the services out because they go on their Excel spreadsheets and they find out the way to profit the most out of that business is to cut the services.
They're doing the same thing to
they're just
accounting firms too.
they're squeezing money to profit, and what they're doing is basically like harming people who are like the elderly. The same thing is happening in like volunteer fire department. It takes years now to get the equipment, the proper equipment, like fire trucks, all this like critical care equipment, because private equity came in and bought them out, right? And now they're screwed because everything is more expensive, they're ratcheting up. So I think there needs to be a way, especially for this like extractive model, when you're dealing with like life or death people who are needing critical care, the healthcare industry, that needs a major way to shake that up, and I don't know the specific like step-by-step solution to do that. But I'm just saying like it's gone to the point today where it's just like, in my opinion, haywire. It's really unhealthy.
And I think you could say the
Society.
same exact sort of framework of argument for AI, like extractive sort of benefit taken out of AI. Like I think a lot of people, individuals, would say that they're scared of AI and that you should slow down and be cautious. But I think it's really hard to do that when you have all the power players, the money makers that control what actually happens, and they're guiding us toward this future that I think no individual really wants, right?
Yeah.
And that's a problem with going with the system, is that you don't have control of the future.
I think
Yeah, this is moving from a philosophical debate to a policy debate.
To go
which
back
is
to one point I made is that, like I said, I can quote this New York Times article, only like 2% of Goldman Sachs, the money that they spend every year goes to actually investing in businesses that, when I say in business, a business that would provide value to someone, either through a product or a service, something that's positive, something
Yeah.
you should encourage. But it's not enough if that's 2% of what you're doing, and the rest is just ratcheting fees on these like credit cards or things. That's when I have an issue with it. Yeah. What do you think, Michael?
I think something that may or may not provide some optimism is this framework that 80,000 Hours has, which is this nonprofit that helps determine what are the most ethical jobs. And the reason that they classify banking, trading, consulting as relatively ethically neutral is because if you work in that industry, then you're a high earner, and you could potentially, if there is the motivation to do so, use your earnings to pay for the salaries of 5 or 6 different humanitarian workers, which could multiply the effects that you yourself could have if you were a direct humanitarian.
Such a hypothetical.
Well,
though.
when-
Like, who's actually doing that?
Well, there are
Like, show me examples.
No, there are people that
there are
do,
people
yeah,
who-
that
Really?
like leverage their
Yeah,
high
yeah.
earnings to do good in the world. There's lots of people like that.
Yeah, but
I'm curious about, because like I'm an artist,
I really
right?
don't.
So where do I fit into this picture of like leveraging my salary, maybe no salary, and like morally, where does that come in?
Well,
Like culture, what cultural value do I provide, and like how does that like pitch into this moral conversation about, you know, like trying to earn as much as I can, and you know,
I'm just laughing. Sorry, I'm just laughing because what you're saying is that they're gonna spend, these higher earners are gonna spend their money on like
Charity.
helping charity. When
No.
meantime, when the guy
They're
who comes
spending it
visits,
on rent, bro.
the guy that the person that visits my dad was in the hospital the other day. It was completely separate, right? That's beside the point. But his bunkmate was this older dude, this rich older dude who's this lawyer on Wall Street for like 30 years. He represented like a blue chip artists, and the person who came to visit him was a stripper, and he was paying her.
What?
He was paying her rent, and like they had this whole conversation over them. So my point is like, I really don't buy that these like high earners are actually spending their money
they're not.
to support
That's what I'm
these
saying.
like people who are like struggling and making a good living doing
Most
ethical work. What they're paying for is like sex and like drugs and booze and like
yeah.
Well,
like
that's what
But it can be a good
escorts.
strategy.
They're
It's a
paying for that.
strategy.
That's what I'm
That's
It's
what
a
most
strategy.
people would do in that
But what do
situation.
they spend their money on?
I don't know. Probably just getting by in life, like paying rent and paying their landlord. I don't know.
But you can see where it could be a useful strategy or tactic to go towards the things Michael's arguing for, right? It's a logical, like,
It's like
and I know there are people like that optimize their earnings to do good, like there are moral people, and it's not always charity, right? It comes in different forms too. It can be like donating your time, like helping your community because you're now financially free, like things like that. I know there are a lot of people like that. So
Yeah,
I don't think it's totally bullshit.
No. Okay, this is kind of like diverging topics we're saying, because like on the one hand you're saying like that's something an individual can take that action, but what I'm saying is my thinking on how to fix financialization is more on like the policy level, on like the
Yeah,
law level.
philosophical
They're
versus
separate,
policy.
so you can't really combine those.
Philosophical
Yeah, I just
versus
wanted
policy.
to stand up for
Yeah,
what
no,
Michael
yeah.
said.
Philosophical versus policy.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, Michael, what did you have to say? Like that, it's a useful tactic. But then, like, how do I feel as an artist about that? You know.
So I guess firstly, we would ask, like, do you agree with Singer's moral premises?
I think mostly yes.
Okay, so
Kind of like,
Then-
do you renounce Satan?
in that case, I mean, just one possible action would be through the second or third, or no, the second path that 80,000 hours mentions, which is
No.
or first, I guess, but the second is activist. A lot of artists they try to persuade people through their art.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, that fits perfectly actually.
Is it okay if we stop here and then we can have our
And we
conversation?
can return to the actual debate now if you guys
Wait.
still had more to
So I have one thing I want to text you guys. Kwasi, can you put your phone number in? I want to.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me end this.
Okay.